Today, we're diving into one of the most, well, bizarre doesn't even begin to cover it. We're talking about a trial where the defendant didn't just stay silent, he had been dead for 9 months. And I mean that literally. This is not a metaphor. We are talking about an actual corpse, dug up, dressed in papal robes, propped up on a throne, and forced to face charges from a living pope. This is the truly unbelievable story of the Cadaver Synod. So you have to ask, why? I mean, why would anyone go to all the trouble of digging up a body and putting it on trial? Was the Pope a madman? Was it some kind of extreme religious fanaticism? Or was it something much, much colder and more calculated? Let's figure this out together. All right, so let's set the scene. The place is Rome. The year is 897. We're inside the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which is the Pope's official cathedral. But what was happening inside was, well, it was anything but holy. Can you just picture this? The body of the former Pope, Formosus, rotting away inside these sacred robes. They even had a young deacon hide behind the corpse to answer the questions for him. But here's the crucial part. This wasn't insanity. This was a message. It was brutal, terrifying political theater designed for maximum impact. To really get the why, we have to look at the man in the dock, or on the throne, Pope Formosus. His career was basically a masterclass in political maneuvering, and along the way, he made some incredibly powerful enemies. You know, Formosus was a major player long before he ever became pope. He was brilliant, but so ambitious that he actually got himself excommunicated at one point. When he finally got the top job in 891, he was stepping right into the middle of a very dangerous political game. And then, in 896, just a few months before he died, he made a fateful choice that would literally come back to haunt him. Okay, so what it all boiled down to was a huge power struggle for control of Rome. On one side, you had the Spoletans. They were a powerful local family who basically saw the papacy as their own personal property. And on the other side, you had the Carolingians, the heirs to Charlemagne's old empire. Formosus, our dead pope, he backed the Carolingians. But his accuser, Pope Stephen VI, he was a puppet of the Spoletan family. And here it is. This is the act of betrayal that sealed his fate. Formosus had been pressured into crowning a Spoletan emperor, but behind their backs, he secretly invited the Carolingian king, Arnulf, to come invade Italy. When Arnulf got to Rome, Formosus crowned him the new emperor, basically stabbing the Spoletans right in the back. Formosus died soon after, probably thinking he'd won. He had no idea the revenge his enemies were planning would reach beyond the grave. Okay, so let's get back to the trial itself. Pope Stephen, with the vengeful Spoletans pulling his strings, couldn't just let Formosus's actions stand. He needed to completely erase them. And to do that, he had to prove that Formosus was never a legitimate pope to begin with. Stephen's weapon of choice was a little technicality in church law, or canon law. See, there was this old rule that said a bishop couldn't just transfer from one territory to another. So the argument was, since Formosus was the Bishop of Porto before he became the Pope of Rome, his entire papacy was illegal. It was totally cynical, but from a legal standpoint, kind of a brilliant move. So, with the decomposing body of Formosus propped up right in front of him, Pope Stephen read out the charges. It said that he was screaming at the corpse, prosecuting the case himself, accusing his dead predecessor of everything from perjury to illegally seizing the papacy. The whole thing was just a horrifying show trial, where the outcome was never, ever in doubt. And the punishment? Wow. It was just as symbolic as it was gruesome. First, of course, the corpse was found guilty. Then, they cut off the 3 fingers on his right hand, the ones he used for blessings, as a way of ritually canceling every single thing he'd ever done as pope. They stripped him of his holy robes, and finally, they dragged his body through the streets of Rome and threw it into the Tiber River, the ultimate desecration. So Stephen and the Spoletans thought they'd won. They hadn't just punished their enemy, they had literally erased him from history. But they had completely misjudged how the people of Rome would react. The whole grotesque spectacle backfired spectacularly. The citizens of Rome were absolutely appalled. To them, this wasn't justice, it was sacrilege. And then, get this, a powerful earthquake shook the city right after the trial. A lot of people saw that as a sign of God's anger. Public opinion turned against Pope Stephen, and it turned violently. Within months, a mob rose up, had him overthrown, thrown in prison, and eventually strangled to death in his cell. So the Cadaver Synod didn't create stability, it unleashed absolute chaos. And this single number tells the entire story. In the 6 years that followed the trial, there were 9 different popes, as rival factions fought for control and kept reversing the verdicts against Promosus. The years that followed were just this bizarre, macabre, revolving door of justice. One pope would have Formosus' body fished out of the river and reburied with honors. The very next pope would officially condemn the trial. Then, in 904, Pope Sergius III, who was actually part of the original trial, dug up the corpse again, had it beheaded, and threw it back in the river one more time. The chaos was absolute. So what's the real lesson here? The Cadaver Synod wasn't just some strange one-off event. It was actually a symptom of a much deeper sickness that had completely taken over the papacy. Historians call this era the Saeculum Obscurum, which means the dark age of the papacy. For almost a century, the papal throne was treated like a family business, controlled by powerful aristocrats who just installed their own relatives and puppets as pope. The sacred office had become just another pawn for gaining earthly power and money. So in the end, that's what this was all about. The trial was pure political terror. By desecrating the body of a pope, the Spalatin faction sent a crystal clear and brutal message to all of their rivals. Our power is absolute. If you cross us, not even the sanctity of the grave will protect you from our revenge. And all of this leaves us with a final, really big question. The Cadaver Synod was an extreme, horrifying attempt to literally rewrite the past by just declaring a papacy invalid. But that urge to control the story, to control the historical narrative for political gain, that's timeless. It's a powerful reminder that history is often a battleground, and it makes you wonder who, even today, is trying to put the past on trial.